Okay, so now we're talking about moving from a relatively neutral mount situation like this to a superior control position. So either passing the arm or pinning the arm. Let's start with pinning the arm. So when I pin the arm, my objective, as we already mentioned, is to bring his elbow as far away and as high away as possible, above his shoulder. So either 1 or 2. This does a few things. The first thing that it does is that it brings my partner in a very weak and compromised position. Understand that whenever a limb is far away from the core, it becomes, the further away it gets, the weaker it becomes. So when limbs are very in close and tight to the core, it's a very powerful limb especially to extend and submit. So if I want to go and make a joint lock from here, it's going to be impossible against a resisting opponent. But the more I bring his elbow far and away from his core, the weaker it will become. The other great thing that this does, the bringing the elbows up does, is that it allows me to, first of all, interfere with my opponent's breathing. So it allows me to put chest pressure on his nose and mouth, interfere with his breathing. And even though he manages to keep breathing, sometimes you see some other chokes in competition or even in training, especially when your partner is already maybe a little bit gassed out, whatever the case might be. Even if you cannot directly interfere with your opponent's breathing, one of the great things that pinning and separating the arms do is the fact that you can put an enormous amount of stress on your partner. And obviously, when we talk about resisting opponent, strong, maybe heavier, maybe younger than you, stress should account for a big percentage of your goal setting, in the sense that you should really emphasizing stressing your opponent, because a stressed opponent is an opponent that makes, generally speaking, bad decisions. So it's going to be very hard to submit a very disciplined and relaxed opponent that makes good defensive choices, and it's going to be much easier to submit an opponent that is tired, stressed, panicky, and so on and so forth. So one of the great things that this allows us to do is to really stress my partner into making mistakes that he wouldn't make otherwise, providing that he's a reasonable person with a reasonable defensive game. So how do we start? Overarching dilemma: passing the arm across my center line or pinning the arm. Let's start by pinning the arm. So my partner is going to have a relatively disciplined position right here. Obviously, he's not worried about me punching him in his face, and it's going to have his arms in tight. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to target the top hand. I want to go cross wrist, and I want to target really where the hand meets the arm, really on the wrist. I don't want to go for fingers. I don't want to go on the arm. I want to really go on the wrist. And I want to go 2-on-1 with this baseball grip. And I want to put pressure until I manage to pin his arm. As much as possible, I do not want to let my partner engage his pec muscle or his biceps. I want to go and target the rotational cuff, which is a much weaker muscle to beat. So I really want to go and target here, this rotational movement, because for me, I can bring weight into the movement. For him, he's holding my whole body weight with this, just like those band exercises sometimes we do. So I go, baseball grip, and I start pinning the arm. This should always be, against a disciplined opponent, this should always be your go-to move. From here, a few things can happen. He can either accept this, and now we're going to look at what happens, or he can go with the other hand and physically catch his hand and bring it back to the center line, and this as I already mentioned, gives us back exposure, a certain degree of back exposure, and he basically is passing the arm. So we're going to look at that in a second. Or he can explosively just bring the arm in without the aid of the other arm. This is not the end of the world. As a matter of fact, this is a very good reaction, because for me, not for him, because this tires him out even more. Okay, it's going to be very hard, and that's what I want. If he goes or retracts the arm, I can go and I can pin the other one. And so I play this pinning game until I make him tired enough that I really manage to securely pinning the arm on the floor. At this point, he's left with two options. It's a very simple dilemma. Either he accepts the pin, or he has to expose his own back to protect the pinned arm. Let's talk about the pin first. I managed to pin the arm, and now I want to go and get a cross face. I go underneath his leg, and I want to secure here his wrist. Now, some might want to go into a Kimura. I understand that a Kimura with the head inside, an Americana with a head inside is figure 4. This is really not a thing, okay? Especially if the head is inside, this is absolutely a no-go. Sometimes you see, especially people maybe have a gi background, or maybe they started training many years ago. Maybe you were taught this Americana move. It's definitely a legit submission, but you don't see it in modern jiu-jitsu nowadays. You don't really see it quite as much. I don't tend to teach it because it's relatively low percentage. It's pretty easy to defend. So a much more secure method and a much more stressful method for your partner is really to go hold the wrist in place, and now we start to get an underhook. And this is where the ratcheting game starts. So I get my underhook. I really want to target the very long end of the lever with the inside of my elbow. At this point, I can let this go, lift, and catch. I really want to emphasize catching, basically almost either his triceps or his lat muscle. Really want to catch here. Okay. At this point, he's going to be trying to put his elbow back, as in lock everything tight. Yeah, here, exactly. He's going to try to resist. And now I start a ratcheting game. So every centimeter that I get, I don't lose it. I have my hand on the floor. What allows me to go from a position in which his elbow is underneath the line of his shoulder to a position in which his elbow is almost above his head is a movement of my whole body weight across my partner's center line. See, I'm going to this side of his body to the other side of his body. So what I want to do is stretch my arm and move my head on the far side of his body. Okay, on the opposite side. Here, boom. This gain gets solidified by me finger walking out and away in 45 degrees angle. So we start from very low. Let's start from very low so that exactly. So we start from here. I move my head and stretch my arm, and I solidify the gain. When I come back, I'm planting my hand. My hand never leaves the floor. As soon as my hand leaves the floor, it's almost too easy for him to hit an explosive movement and just lock my arms in tight. And now I either have to start from the beginning, or I can even lose my base of support and get bridged out, or whatever the case might be. Okay, so my hand, once it's posting on the floor, it never ever leaves the floor until the very end of the movement. So I'm here, I switch my head across the center line, and I solidify the gains. I come back, I go, and I solidify the gains. Every centimeter that I gain, I don't lose. At this point, when I notice that my partner's elbow is above his shoulder, that's when I start driving towards his head. So I was out, 45 degrees angle out and away, and now I start driving towards his head. The hardest part of the move is from here to his shoulder. As soon as my partner's elbow drifts above my partner's shoulders, that's a much more compromised position, and you should be able to manipulate the arm much easier. So as soon as I'm here, I start finger walking towards the head until I cup my partner's head just like this. This is a checkpoint. This is already a great position. I can increase it even further by lifting the head. This is going to be a constant topic throughout the series. I want to lift the head and I want to catch my own shoulder, my own elbow, sorry. So I have on one side, I have this lat grip, the shoulder grip. On this side, I have my elbow. At this point, the only thing that he's left to do, he's going to have his arm, right here, is to shrug and look away. Shrug and look away, opposite side of his arm. Go back. Cinch. Yeah, that's it. I want to shrug with my shoulder, and I want to look away until I can physically see my partner's forearm. If I cannot see my partner's forearm, it's good, but it's not ideal. Once I can see my partner's forearm, this is just time to start driving forward. Forward, until my head hits the floor. I can potentially cross my feet. If my partner bridges to relieve the shoulder pressure, I can start crossing my feet. This is a superb position. This is where I can start putting serious stress on my partner, interfere with his breathing, and really moving into subsequent submissions. So this should always be your opening move. You should always open with a single chest rep, which is the name of this position. Single chest rep. From a single chest rep, we're going to look at 4 control positions. Okay, so it's going to be the single chest rep, which is this one. It's going to be a double chest rep. It's also known as double underhooks. It's going to be a far lat, and it's going to be a figure 4 arm rep. Don't worry, we're going to go through each and any one of those very systematically. So we start again. We're here. I go 2-on-1 at the wrist. I start pinning the arm. If he does that, great. I go for the back. We're going to look at that later. If he doesn't, I secure my grip, and I go underneath the elbow. I lift and I catch the shoulder. At this point, cinch down, it's going to be a ratcheting movement. Move my head, stretch my elbow, and secure the gains with the finger walk. I secure, I go and secure. At this point, the elbow is above the shoulder. I can start much easier driving towards the head. I catch the head. He's going to have his arm behind my back. At this point, I want to shrug until I can see my partner's arm. I lift and catch. Drive. Lock my feet if necessary. If he lifts his hips, and this is where I can start putting serious pressure on my partner.